Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons where we try and take a darker tone with everything we do here. So if you like edgy kind of content, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description, as well as the link to our good friends at Critical Failures, where we're part of their live stream game every Wednesday night. Definitely check them out. And with all that out of the way, we're going to jump into this week's video. We're going to talk about the Land Druid. The Land Druid comes to us from the Player's Handbook. This was one of the original subclasses for the Druid. It only had two, so it was very offset as people picked the Circle of the Moon. Usually that's the one where you fundamentally spend a lot of time in wild shape and boost up your wild shape. Now, you still have wild shape, but it kind of takes a different role with the Land Druid, and that's a little bit more difficult for most people to understand. That role now kind of assumes the part of adventuring, being stealthy, things like that. If you have to sneak up to something, wild shape into a creature that's great at being stealthy. Use that to your advantage. You got to climb a mountain, wild shape into something that can fly when you're at that level. That's something that you really need to understand as a concept that you got to take away from especially subclasses that use wild shape for different things. But this is more so akin to being as close to the wizard as a druid could possibly be. You're more of a spellcaster. You're kind of urged in that kind of a direction. But one of the important things to note is that you do get domain spells, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, so that's going to really impact who your character is. But the Land Druid is that real connection to the magic of nature, where the Circle of the Moon is a real connection to the spirits of nature, like the living, moving part of nature, like animals and that kind of a sort. And as you go on with the other circles, they kind of assume a different entity of that. And the Druid of the Land really draws inspiration from the world around them, from the tangible earth around them, and uses that to channel their magical energies, and they're more geared towards specifically using magic, as the other subclasses are usually kind of geared toward doing something with a special ability. Like the Spores Druid is more about that symbiotic entity and using the spores and using that as kind of a main usage of your overall abilities. And the Shepherds is more about summoning. Dreams is more about that kind of ethereal mentality. Like there's a lot of differences between them, and the Land Druid kind of really sticks to that, what a traditional druid, someone who lives in the forest or something that casts spells and helps people, that's kind of what you're looking at with this particular subclass. So at second level, you gain your ability to choose your subclass with the Druid, and you get two abilities. First and foremost, you get a bonus cantrip when you choose this circle at second level. You learn one additional Druid cantrip of your choice. This cantrip doesn't count against the number of Druid cantrips you know. As the Druid, you have less cantrips known as a full spellcaster than a wizard. So this does give you an opportunity to take something. Personally, I happen to like Primal Savagery a lot, and I happen to like Thorn Whip, but everything you pick should be dependent on the kind of character that you are. Not every situation needs a melee spellcaster, but you want to have something up close just in case something does happen. And you also gain natural recovery. Starting at second level, you can regain some of your magical energy by sitting in meditation and communing with nature. During a short rest, you choose expended spell slots to recover. The spell slots can have a combined level that is equal to or less than half your druid level, rounded up. And none of the slots can be of 6th level or higher. You can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. And they give you a little example. If you are a 4th level druid, you can recover up to 2 levels worth of spell slots. You can choose to recover either a 2nd level spell slot or 2 1st level spell slots. The wizard has an ability like this in the base wizard class. The druids do not. In a circumstance where spell slots are by long rest, this does give you an availability as you're progressing to be able to gain something out of your short rest that helps you beneficially for the rest of the party. It grows up to a point A lot of the times, a 6th level spell slot is really something that it's going to be dependent on how high up your level goes in a combat. But not being able to recover that kind of makes sense, because once you get to 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spells, you're not dropping those as often as you think you would be. More often than not, you're burning through those 1st and 2nd and 3rd, 4th, and 5th level spell slots long before you touch those 6th level spell slots. Because if there's not a 6th level spell slot that you're saving to nuke a boss, there's another spell that you're looking to upcast for whatever reason for that kind of a thing. So it's a great recovery. It gives you longevity to your spells. It gives you more ability to cast them throughout the day. And it does give you that kind of feeling that if you cast a spell and nothing happens, say it's a save or suck spell, and the enemy saves, it doesn't hurt you as bad as it does without this ability. When you pick this subclass, you also gain circle spells. Your mystical connection to the land infuses you with the ability to cast certain spells at 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th level. You gain access to circle spells connected to the land where you became a druid. Choose that land, Arctic, coast, desert, forest, grassland, mountain, swamp, or underdark, and consult the associated spell list. Once you gain access to a circle spell, you always have it prepared, and it doesn't count against the number of spells you can prepare each day. If you gain access to a spell that doesn't appear on a druid spell list, the spell is nonetheless a druid spell for you. Now, I'm not going to go into extreme detail and go through every single spell on every single spell list, but what I am going to say is make sure you take great care in picking what land you come from. On top of the fact that some of these spells are great, some of these spells are kind of very, very situational. Some of them are pretty universal in their uses. Some of them you kind of really need to figure out the right kind of circumstance for why you would want them. But the thing is, a lot of them will be good enough that you'll get uses out of some of the spells out of there, usually at any point in the game once you kind of gain access to them. You don't have to worry about what spells you have prepared, because as you get some of these spells, you will be able to say, all right, this is my spell for that, and then I can take some other druid spells to kind of fit in for some utility or some healing or something like that. And it's important to kind of make those choices, because as a full spellcaster, your spells say a lot about who your character is, and I think it's really reflective on your character, and you should really pick up spells that kind of reflect the personality and the background of your character. That being said, because this has to do with the land in which you became a druid, when you're like creating your character, you should really try and fit some of these themes into how your character looks. I think if you're like if you're a swamp druid, like you should be pretty creepy. You should be probably a kind of gross, kind of swampy monster, like a lizard folk or something like that would fit really, really well there, because you're used to that kind of environment. It looks really well. Aesthetically, you can really come up with a lot of great things that pull that together. And you get a good connection to your magic and to your character's class, not only their backstory. If you're from the Arctic, maybe you have like white in your beard. Maybe you're something that lives in that snowy mountainous area. So a lot of the stuff that you wear is to help conceal you to that area. So maybe you wear furs from like polar bears and foxes and things like that are all with white fur. Maybe that's kind of a big part of it. Maybe your character is very, very possessive about certain resources that they deem valuable, like heat, shelter, and food, because it's very scarce where you come from. And sometimes you have to be very patient and very enduring in order to make it through there. And some of those things might trickle down into some of the traits that you make your character. When you have domain spells or circle spells, it's kind of the same thing with clerics, you kind of miss an opportunity when you don't connect those spells and those abilities and that domain or land to who your character is, as opposed to just going, oh, you know what, I just want colon real bad when I hit 9th level, and I don't want to have it prepared, I want some other stuff on top of it. That's why I'm picking Arctic. But you act like a crazy person, and maybe you're more aligned with a different kind of a mentality. Maybe you're very aggressive and conniving and violent, and the Underdark would fit your character better than the Arctic would. Maybe you kind of work that together, because I always find that, like, you can hit high numbers, you can hit perfect builds that you've seen wherever, but that character will always mean less to you than a character that you actually put the time and effort into to draw out those nuances and give that character a real defining feature and sequence of traits and goals and backstory, because that's a character you look forward to playing, because that has weight to it, as opposed to just something that was just put together just so you can hit a high number, because you lose that sometimes. Obviously, that's not all the case all the time. Some people do that in combination with making great characters, but sometimes it is something that you have to really work towards, because sometimes it's just things that don't make a lot of sense but kind of fit for the numbers as opposed to the character. Land Stride. Starting at 6th level, moving through non-magical difficult terrain costs you no extra movement. You can also pass through non-magical plants without being slowed by them and without taking damage if they have thorns, spines, or similar hazards. In addition, you have advantage on saving throws against plants that are magically created or manipulated to impede movement, such as those created by the Entangle spell. Now, this is a 6th level ability, and in all honesty, there's going to be very few and far between circumstances where you encounter a lot of plants that are being problematic. It's just the way the world is. In all honesty, I would manipulate this that you can actually walk in and out of any kind of terrain that is involved with plants, even if it is magical or not, because if it's magical, it still has to obey the rules of plants. Because without it, this essentially does nothing for you. Very rarely do you ever have DMs that run campaigns where druids are bad guys in the circumstance that you do encounter them using the Entangle spell or plant growth or spike growth. It's really few and far between those kinds of circumstances. But I would do it, and I would homebrew the rule that it can also work for magical plants or natural environments, so that way at least you could throw down spike growth and sit in the middle of it and maneuver in and out and kind of draw enemies in, use that thorn whip to drag them into it, and if they get out of it, drag them back in with it. Use those kinds of circumstances so that way you can really make kind of a more sensible use out of it, because as it is, it's just a lackluster ability that really doesn't give you much, unless you're doing something where you're genuinely fighting evil druids. You'll never encounter this. It's just such an annoyance of an ability, because even if you do hit difficult terrain with plants, it's a circumstance that your whole party hits difficult terrain with plants, and you being fast and being able to run through it isn't going to get you anything, because you'll be able to walk through, but you still got to wait for your party to make their way. And it just really lacked a lot of imagination here, sorry to say. But at 10th level, you get Nature's Ward. You can't be charmed or frightened by elements or fae, and you are immune to poison and disease. Being immune to poison is beneficial. There's a lot of times where you can't get poison, or poison abilities do tend to make you have disadvantage in combats and ability checks, so not having to worry about that's pretty good. At level 10, you really got to fight certain enemies to get that, but you are inclined to actually fight them. A lot of poisons kind of come from things that are usually around undead, spiders and things like that, drow, a lot of the things in the Underdark. There's a lot of places that have heavy poison in it. If you're dealing with the Yuan-Ti, that kind of really throws you in right in the middle of that mix. And it's beneficial to you. Fae and elements, you're more likely to encounter elements than fae. Elementals tend to not really charm you so much, but if you're in a circumstance where you're dealing with the fae, and the fae can get pretty gnarly, it's pretty great to not have to worry about being charmed or not. Frightened, I really wish he was just frightened by anything, because I think that kind of makes sense, or at least advantage on being resisting being frightened would be good as well. But again, the Fae are more inclined to use these abilities than the Elementals, but Elementals will still try to do it, I guess. And then your final ability is Nature's Sanctuary. When you reach 14th level, creatures of the natural woods sense your connection to nature and become hesitant to attack you. When a beast or plant creature attacks you, that creature must make a wisdom saving throw against your druid spell save DC. On a failed save, the creature must choose a different target, or the attack automatically misses. On a successful save, the creature is immune to this effect for 24 hours. The creature is aware of this effect before it makes its attacks against you. You will most likely hit some beasts around this level that can still kind of be an issue. Again, this is one of those things where it's campaign dependent, and this is a lot of the reasons why people tend to lose steam with the Land Druid. At 14th level, you're at the end of most campaigns. Most campaigns, again, are usually still running between 10 and 12. It's kind of where you end off. So to hit these higher level abilities, it's a pretty rare circumstance. But as far as plants are concerned, I don't really think you're really going to encounter much. I mean, maybe someone might summon twig blights or something, but again, that's very few and far between. Beasts might be your more popular enemy, depending, again, on your campaign. Though even still, some of those beasts might be a lower CR and just in large enough groups that they become a challenging fight. But it does give you a big deterrent for other circumstances. But you got to be in the right campaign. So it's one of those things that becomes super niche, as they say. The Land Druid, it does give you a bunch of ideas to create a really good character and really come up with a couple of themes and really kind of put them all together really, really well. Because of the nature of being a druid and the kind of circumstance that they evolve into with their powers and abilities, it does give you a cool pull to your class. That being said, it's one of those things where dependent on your campaign would depict whether or not this is really, really viable or not. Personally, I will do whatever I want. I don't really care so much about how well I'm going to do in the campaign, because I'm going to do well. I'm going to figure out some way to make it work. And ultimately, if not, I play with a lot of people. Some of them tend to be really oriented about doing damage and being big damage builds. So they tend to kind of handle everything really well. In case I don't end up performing as well, I can focus on the other aspects and really dive into that. Again, I'm a role player first, so I could care less if we're fighting all undead and I still pick this anyway. It's going to be fun for me because of the character that I build, and that's kind of how I go forward. Most people, though, it would have to kind of need to make all of these abilities useful in order for the right campaign for the character. Be whoever you are. If you're looking and you're interested in playing this character in a campaign, definitely talk to your DM and get some of those things cleared up and maybe mitigate so that way you don't feel so underpowered. Or if you are, maybe your DM is trained enough really to compensate that by giving you specific magic items to help really bring your character to the forefront, so you kind of compensate in case you do have any shortcomings in combat. That being said, we're going to bring this video to a close. And thank you so much for making it this far. If you made it this far, hit that like and subscribe button. Big thank you to our Patreon supporters again. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description, as well as the link to our good friends at Critical Failures. Check us out Wednesday nights. All the other videos are up there, so in case you want to catch up or jump in and binge something, definitely do so. And thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.